This is what a nuclear explosion really looks like. The scale is unbelievable. 4:16 a.m. The city is asleep, and the sky is clean. Then every window turns white at once. No thunder follows. Just a flash that feels like a hand inside your skull. In that instant, the world does not change. It switches. There is no warning you can trust. Phones show no service, and then they die. Sirens try to start, but the grid stutters like a choking engine. People sit up in bed, confused, not afraid yet. Fear arrives a few seconds later, when the light keeps growing. Look at the horizon. It blooms like a second sunrise, too fast and too bright. Your eyes water, even through curtains. The air tastes metallic, like a battery on your tongue. As the world holds its breath, where will you be when the flash comes first? Because this is what a nuclear explosion really looks like. Not a mushroom cloud, not a distant headline. It is geometry and physics arriving at human scale. And once it happens, the old world does not end. A new, harder one begins. The missile flies before anyone speaks out loud. A sealed order opens in a hardened room. 2 officers read the same line twice to be sure. A coded burst rides military satellites and buried fiber lines. Execute. That single word turns procedures into motion. In a separate nation, a radar returns a ghost. A track appears, then multiplies, then becomes too many to count. The screen does not show intent. It shows speed and arc. The decision window is measured in minutes, then in seconds, then in faith. The public sees nothing at first. Morning news runs weather and traffic. A talk host laughs at a meme. In the background, a producer gets a phone call that contains no details, only urgency. The studio lights keep shining while the world's arteries constrict. Airborne alert aircraft launch into black sky, silent and heavy. Submarines change depth and heading, turning oceans into moving launch pads. Every step is designed for certainty, even though certainty is gone. Then the first detonation happens, high above a major city. Not because mercy exists, but because physics is efficient. An airburst converts more of the blast into surface-level ruin. It is a weapon optimized for infrastructure, for people, for everything that makes a city a city. The flash is the first messenger. Light moves faster than panic. It paints shadows with impossible contrast. For a fraction of a second, you see everything too clearly, like the world is outlined in bone-white ink. The thermal pulse follows, and it is not heat like a fire. It is radiant energy that turns skin into a measurement. Exposed flesh blisters in moments. Dark clothing becomes a liability. Anything dry enough to burn starts deciding whether it will. If you are near ground zero, there is no story. There is no survival lesson. There is only a fireball expanding into the air, a sphere of incandescent gas. Steel loses its meaning. Concrete becomes smoke. The city center is erased, not damaged. Outside that core, the blast wave arrives like a wall that moves. It is pressure made visible by what it does. Windows detonate outward, then inward, then vanish. Doors fold. Roofs lift and drop. Lungs fill with dust and glass powder. People think they hear an explosion, but at first there is only silence. The shock front outruns the sound your brain expects. Ears pop, then ring, then stop working. A second later, the city begins to scream, not with voices, but with alarms failing and metal tearing. You look up and the cloud is forming, but it is not a mushroom yet. It is a boiling column of ash, water vapor, and pulverized city. It climbs because hot air rises, and because the physics of violence wants altitude. It pulls debris upward like a vacuum turned inside out. The scale becomes obvious when you watch streets 3 miles away. Cars flip without touching each other. Streetlights snap like stems. A bridge shudders and loses sections as if bitten. You realize this is not an event at one point. It is a moving circle of consequence. The first minutes are pure confusion. Some people run toward the blast because curiosity is stronger than sense. Others run away because their bodies decide before their minds do. Traffic lights die and intersections become arenas. Horns become the city's new heartbeat. Cellular networks drown in attempts, then fail as towers lose power. Internet routes reroute, then choke. Social media shows 1,000 angles, none of them complete. The truth becomes a fog made of clips and guesses. Government spokespeople try to speak, but the microphones depend on electricity. Emergency alert systems push messages, but half the population never receives them. 2 words that sound simple, but hide brutal details. Shelter from what? Heat, glass, debris, radiation, panic. The body wants to run outside and look. Survival wants you underground, behind mass, away from windows, away from your own instincts. The catalyst is not only the detonation, it is the chain reaction inside systems. A nuclear strike is also a communications strike. It fractures trust, and trust is what holds cities together. When people stop believing the rules will apply tomorrow, they stop obeying them today. Inside hospitals, generators kick on. Some start clean. Some cough and fail. Nurses move beds away from windows because glass is now shrapnel. Doctors triage in hallways because hallways have fewer exterior walls. Every decision becomes an ugly math problem. Fire departments roll, then stall. Water pressure drops as mains rupture. Hydrants spit air and muddy spray. Fire engines become stranded in gridlock. The fires do not spread like a normal blaze. Hot air rises over the burning zone, pulling air inward from every direction. The wind feeds the flames like bellows. People outside the core feel a sudden pull, as if the city is inhaling them. Houses still stand, streets still exist. People step outside and film the cloud, stunned by its beauty. Then the ash begins to fall, and it looks like snow, and it lands on warm skin, like a warning. Cars clog highways out of sheer instinct. Families pack without plans. Gas stations become choke points. Pumps need electricity, and electricity is already rationed by damage and overload. A line forms, then an argument, then a fight. Civilization breaks at the exact places it depends on convenience. MEMS freeze. The screens go dark, or they display error codes nobody reads. Credit card terminals fail because networks fail. Money becomes paper again, then becomes useless paper. People do not panic because they are poor. They panic because the future is suddenly cash-only and uncertain. Grocery stores get stripped in under an hour, not because there is no food, but because fear eats first. Water disappears. Canned goods vanish. Batteries become currency. Parents grab formula like it is gold. The shelves empty like a tide going out. Police dispatch centers get overwhelmed. Calls stack in queues. Explosion. Fire. People trapped, shooting. Officers respond, then get rerouted, then get stuck, then stop responding at all. A second detonation happens somewhere else. Maybe across the ocean, maybe inland, maybe above another city on your own map. You do not know for sure because the networks that confirm reality are failing. Rumors spread faster than fallout, and they are just as toxic. You hear the word retaliation, and it lands heavy. It means this is not one tragedy. It is a sequence. It means the people in charge are no longer trying to prevent war. They are trying to survive it and to ensure the other side does not. Military aircraft cross the sky in tight formation. Some are visible, some are not. The sound is constant now, a distant growl like a storm. Everyone looks up, searching for meaning in contrails. The sky becomes a screen for your dread. In bunkers and cabinet rooms, leaders speak in clipped phrases. They talk about second strikes and secure communications. They talk about deconfliction, which is a polite word for avoiding accidental apocalypse. They talk about Article 5 and mutual defense, and you feel the weight of alliances. But you are not in those rooms. You are in the streets, or in your home, or in a basement. Your world is local and immediate. Your enemy is not a nation. Your enemy is broken glass, smoke, contaminated dust, and the human urge to crowd together. The invisible threat arrives next, and it does not announce itself. Radiation is not a monster with a sound. It is an accounting problem written into atoms. If the detonation is a surface burst, fallout becomes a moving stain. If it is an air burst, fallout is lighter, but still real. Wind decides who suffers later. Weather becomes a weapon's extension. A plume forms, drifting downwind, carrying particles that settle on roofs, cars, skin, water sources. People stand outside to watch, and the dust settles on their hair like a cruel blessing. Information at this moment is poison disguised as clarity. One channel says to evacuate. Another says to shelter. A third says nothing because it went off air. A stranger's voice on a hand-crank radio becomes more authoritative than a government website you cannot load. The first hour ends with a strange quiet. Not peace, not safety. A lull created by exhaustion and shock. The fires still burn, the cloud still climbs. But the human body cannot panic forever. It starts conserving energy, and that is when the real decisions begin. Phase I fades into phase 2, and the breakdown becomes visible. The grid is not down everywhere, but it becomes unstable like a wounded animal. Power plants trip offline to protect themselves. Transmission lines sag, snap. Substations burn. Neighborhoods flicker, then go dark. With power goes water. Municipal pumps fail. High-rise buildings lose pressure first. Faucets cough and stop. Toilets become liabilities. Within a day, sanitation becomes a crisis that nobody planned for. In a modern city, clean water is the first invisible miracle you lose. With power goes refrigeration. Food begins to spoil silently. Pharmacies lose temperature-controlled drugs. Insulin becomes urgent. Hospitals burn through generator fuel, and fuel deliveries cannot move through chaos. A patient's survival becomes dependent on traffic patterns and diesel. With power goes temperature control. In winter, apartments turn into refrigerators. In summer, they turn into ovens. People who survived the blast now face something slower and meaner. Exposure does not feel dramatic, but it kills relentlessly. when systems are gone. Cell towers fail not only from overload, but from dead backhaul and dead batteries. Emergency services have radios, but even those suffer interference and damaged repeaters. The city becomes islands of sound separated by dead zones. You cannot call for help. You can only shout. Gas stations are locked by default. The pumps are computers with valves. Without authorization signals and power, they do nothing. Some station owners try to manually dispense, but crowds form and the risk becomes lethal. Fuel becomes a fight you cannot win cleanly. Traffic becomes permanent. Cars abandoned in lanes form barricades. Tunnels become traps. Bridges become choke points with rumors attached to them. People walk between vehicles, carrying bags, pushing strollers, dragging pets. The city turns into a refugee camp without tents. The supermarket shelves are not empty because of shortages. They are empty because of fear. Fear is faster than logistics. Fear does not wait for confirmation. It buys now, hoards now, hits now, and then it looks around and realizes everyone else did the same thing. You see the shift in faces. In the first hour, people look stunned. In the first day, they look busy. By the second day, they look hungry. Hunger changes posture. It changes voices. It turns strangers into threats and neighbors into competitors. Armed security appears at places you did not expect. Not always official, not always legal. A store owner with a shotgun becomes the new boundary line. A neighborhood group puts up barricades with trash cans and furniture. The city fractures into micro-territories overnight. Hospitals start refusing new patients, not because they want to, but because they cannot treat them. They run out of beds, then out of staff, then out of supplies. Triage becomes brutal, immediate, delayed, expectant. Labels that decide who gets time. Bodies accumulate in places that were never meant for death. Parking garages, school gyms, church basements. Heat and flies arrive. The smell becomes part of the atmosphere. People stop crying, not because they are strong, but because tears are expensive. Fire spreads through ruptured gas lines and overturned vehicles. It eats suburbs and downtown districts alike. Without coordinated response, it becomes a moving front. Smoke thickens the air until daylight turns orange. Breathing hurts, and every breath feels like borrowed time. Then comes the rain, and it is not relief. Rain pulls particles down. It washes contamination into gutters and drains. It turns ash into sludge. It writes invisible lines across the city where exposure spikes. People dance in it anyway because they do not know. Phase 3 begins when you realize nobody is coming soon. Not the National Guard, not international aid, not a convoy of relief trucks with perfect order. Those exist in plans, but plans require roads, fuel, security, and communication. You are living in the gap between doctrine and reality. Those who prepared move differently. They do not broadcast. They do not argue in lines. They disappear indoors with water and calories and a way to filter air. They become quiet because quiet is survival. The unprepared become loud because loud is a request for rescue. Community forms in strange ways. A person with a generator becomes a leader. A person with medical training becomes a resource. A person with a radio becomes a lighthouse. Skill becomes more valuable than money. Calm becomes more valuable than strength. Radiation anxiety becomes its own illness. People obsess over symptoms they cannot see. They cough and assume the worst. They look at dust and imagine it glowing. Some take iodine too late or too much, chasing control with chemicals. The best shelter is boring and sealed. Basements, interior rooms, subways if they are intact and not flooding. You want mass between you and the sky. You want time for particles to settle, for the plume to pass, for the world outside to become less hostile. Outside, the city learns a new rhythm. Daytime is for scavenging and moving. Night time is for guarding and listening. Darkness amplifies every sound. A distant gunshot becomes a message. A scream becomes a choice, help and risk or hide and laugh. Shortwave radios crackle with fragments, call signs, coordinates, unverified warnings. Someone claims another strike is coming. Someone claims peace talks are happening. Someone claims the government is gone. Truth becomes a currency with counterfeit everywhere. Zoom out for a moment. Capitals go into lockdown. Emergency sessions convene in hardened facilities. Diplomats speak through secure channels and say the same phrases. Proportional response, escalation control, strategic stability. Meanwhile, more missiles sit armed, waiting for orders. NATO councils argue over thresholds. Allies demand clarity. Adversaries test resolve. Satellites watch for launches like eyes that never blink. The world becomes a chessboard where every move can end the game. Silence from leadership becomes its own terror. Markets, wherever they still function, collapse in real time. Shipping halts, airspace closes, ports lock down. Insurance becomes meaningless. The global supply chain, built for efficiency, cannot survive fear. Food and medicine become strategic commodities overnight. In your region, martial law becomes a rumor, then a reality. Checkpoints appear at bridges and highway ramps. Soldiers look exhausted and young. They do not have enough fuel or orders to fix everything. Their job becomes containment, not rescue. Rationing begins formally or informally. Water distribution points form lines that stretch for blocks. People bring containers, then bring weapons, then bring children as shields. The first riots are not political. They are biological, driven by thirst and panic. The new normal is not constant violence. It is constant tension. It is the knowledge that any dispute can turn lethal because there is no court, no reliable police, no promise of tomorrow. People speak softly, but their hands hover near pockets. A city without power is a city without timekeeping. Clocks stop. Schedules vanish. The day becomes sunup and sundown. You measure hours by hunger and by radio broadcasts. Life becomes primitive in structure, even if you stand among skyscrapers. Waste becomes the slow killer. Trash piles up. Sewage backs up. Rats and insects move in. Disease follows, not as a dramatic plague, but as a steady increase in fevers and infections. Antibiotics run out. A cut becomes a gamble. Fires eventually burn out where fuel is gone. The skyline becomes a jagged silhouette of broken towers and smoke-stained shells. The cloud dissipates into layers, but the memory does not. People flinch at bright lights. Lightning becomes trauma. In some places, local governments persist. They set up shelters, distribute water, enforce curfews. In other places, power is whoever has food and guns. A militia becomes a council. A gang becomes a police force. The difference is mostly vocabulary.